यमुनते रावणचारे यमुनते रावणचारे जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोधनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना यमुनते रावणचारे यमुनते रावणचारे हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Acharya Ashtottara Shata Shri Srimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Disappearance Day Mahotsav Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premananda. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today is the Disappearance Day anniversary of Srila Prabhupada, our spiritual master. So I have selected a verse from the 4th canto in which a parallel is drawn by Narad Muni to the disappearance of the spiritual master, citing a historical incident. So, as we discuss, you will understand what is the connection of this verse to the disappearance of Srila Prabhupada. Okay. So, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiraye Nashtaprayesha Bhadresho Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 28. Chapter 28 is entitled Puranjana becomes a woman in the next life. We are reciting text number 34. Hitva grihan sutan bhogan. Hitva grihan sutan bhogan. Vaidarbhi Madirekshana. Vaidarbhi Madirekshana. Anvadhavata Pandyesham. Anvadhavata Pandyesham. Jyotsnyeva Rajani Karam Jyotsnev Rajanikaram Hitva Grihan Sutan Bhogan Vaidarbhi Madirekshana Anvadhavata Pandyesham Anvadhavata Pandyesham Jyotsnev Rajanikaram Hitva Grihan Sutan Bhogan Vaidarbhi Madirekshana Anvadhavata Pandyesham Jyotsnev Rajanikaram Hitva, giving up. Grihan, home. Sutan, children. Bhogan, material happiness. Vaidarbhi, the daughter of King Vidarbha. Madira Ikshana, with enchanting eyes. Anvadhavata, followed. Pandya Isham, King Malayadhwaja. Jyotsna Iva, like the moonshine. Rajanikaram, the moon. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation. Just as the moonshine follows the moon at night, immediately after King Malayadhwaja departed for Kulachala, his devoted wife, whose eyes were very enchanting, followed him, giving up all homely happiness despite family and children. Please repeat this translation after me. Just as the moonshine follows the moon at night, immediately after King Malayadhwaja departed for Kulachala, his devoted wife, whose eyes were very enchanting, followed him, giving up all homely happiness, despite family and children. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Just as in the Vanaprastha stage the wife follows the husband, similarly, when the spiritual master retires for Nirjana Bhajana, some of his advanced devotees follow him and engage in his personal service. In other words, those who are very fond of family life should come forward in the service of the spiritual master and abandon so-called happiness afforded by society, friendship and love. A verse by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Guru Ashtaka is significant in this regard. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasadaha. A disciple should always remember that by serving the spiritual master, he can easily advance in Krishna consciousness. All the scriptures recommend that it is by pleasing the spiritual master and serving him directly that one can attain the highest perfectional stage of devotional service. I'll stop here. So, the context of this verse is that Narad Muni is instructing one king, Prachina Barhi. This king, even though he was a Rajarshi, he was a saintly king. saintly king. But still, somehow, he became very much engrossed in performing sacrifices for fruitive results, for material benefits. A king is supposed to perform sacrifices. King is supposed to give charity. But the purpose of performing sacrifice or charity should never be for material gain. If that happens, then the king or the performer of the sacrifice and charity will be misled into becoming very enthusiastic for elevation to heavenly planets or enjoying materially even while in this body, in this life. And then such charity, yajna, dana, tapa, these things are no longer spiritual. They are no longer spiritual activities. They are simply material activities. So, Narad Muni became very concerned that this Prachina Bharihi, even though he is a saintly king, he has missed the point and has become very busy with performing sacrifices simply for material benefit. So Narad Muni went to visit this king, and the king received him very respectfully, very nicely. And then the king inquired from Narad Muni the purpose of his visit. Then Narad Muni began instructing the king. So in order to instead of directly telling the king that you should not engage in such sacrifices for material benefit, the purpose should be spiritual advancement, or purpose should be pleasing Krishna. Yajnarthat karmanaha anyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha. And a king, if he is misled, he misleads the entire general population, because he is the leader of the people in the society, the citizens. So he'll mislead the entire population. So therefore Narad Muni thought, I should instruct this king. But Narad Muni is also careful not to directly tell him, in case he does not accept or does not understand or becomes, feels very hurt, and his false ego prevents him from learning the proper lesson, etc. So Narad Muni devised a technique. He told the king, I'll tell you a nice historical incident about what I want to, message I want to give you or communicate to you. So he figuratively described King Prachinabari himself as one king who was living in the ancient times, Puranjana. And he actually prepared a nice story about this King Puranjana. Just like nowadays fiction writers, okay, they may create a fiction story, but actually the fiction story intended not really for entertainment or merely for some purpose of giving some pleasure to the readers or to the viewers of that cinema. The purpose is to communicate something profound, some message is there or moral is there for the people in the society. Similarly, this Narad Muni began to recite this story, calling it as a historical incident that happened in the past. It was not an actual real incident. It was simply trying to describe the position of King Prachinabarhi. So, without getting into details of this story, now you try to hear what Narad Muni is describing and what Prabhupada is giving in the purport. So, here it is said that one personality called King Malayadhwaja in the story of Narad Muni. He was married to one Vaidarbhi, the daughter of King Vidarbha. This Vaidarbhi, in that story which Narad Muni tells King Prachinabari, happened to be the Puranjana in his previous life. Because that Puranjana was very attached to his wife, he took birth after quitting his body as Puranjana, as the king. He took birth as a daughter of a king. And then this daughter is the same soul as Puranjana in his previous life, the soul in his previous life. So this Vaidarbhi, she was married by her father to another king, Malayadhwaja, and she was, this Vaidarbhi was very devoted wife. So she followed her husband when he handed over charge of ruling the kingdom to his sons, and she followed him, giving up all homely happiness despite family and children. Now Prabhupada in the purport is telling, just as in the Vanaprastha stage the wife follows the husband, similarly, now Prabhupada is drawing a parallel between the description of this King Malayadhwaja retiring and the spiritual master retires. So he says, Prabhupada says, when the spiritual master retires for Nirjana Bhajana, some of his advanced devotees follow him and engage in his personal service. The actual description in Narad Muni has nothing to do with spiritual master, or it is for King Prachinabari. But Prabhupada is drawing a parallel and explaining to us something which you can understand. What did his devoted wife, King Malayadhwaja's devoted wife, do when Malayadhwaja passed away? When he retired, what did she do? She gave up all homely happiness despite family and children and followed him to the forest, Vanaprastha stage. So, Prabhupada says, when the spiritual master retires for Nirjana Bhajana, okay, there is a reference to the spiritual master when he is very advanced in age, his senior disciples should actually take charge of the mission of the spiritual master, conducting the mission of the spiritual master according to his instructions, and allow the spiritual master to retire and sit down in a solitary place to write and execute Nirjana Bhajana. Nirjana Bhajana means going to a secluded place and with the purpose of engaging in this Nirjana Bhajana. Nirjana Bhajana means completely focused on a particular activity without being disturbed by others, without having to interact with other persons, including disciples. So, this Nirjana Bhajana, which is a silent worship of the Supreme Lord, is not possible for a neophyte devotee, and etc. Prabhupada explains like that. So, here he says that just like the devoted wife of King Malayadhwaja gave up her homely happiness, etc., similarly, the advanced devotees of these, who are the disciples of the spiritual master, should actually give up their homely comfort if they are grahasthas, or if they are brahmacharis, should give up living in the ashram and follow the spiritual master to the forest. So that is because, Prabhupada says, according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasadaha. Simply by serving the spiritual master, one can very easily advance in Krishna consciousness. And the scriptures say, by pleasing the spiritual master, one can very easily and directly please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, the position of the spiritual master is to be very clearly understood. Even though in some places in scriptures it is said he is a representative of the Supreme Lord, and our goal is to become devoted to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to surrender to Krishna. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. But still we should understand, even for the sake of becoming devoted to Krishna and surrender to Krishna, we accept a spiritual master, we take his guidance and follow his instructions. But still, serving a pure devotee spiritual master is in no way different from directly serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, one should completely surrender to such a spiritual master and without any reservation render all kinds of service to him. So you can understand, what if the spiritual master is not a Uttama Adhikari? Then how can somebody surrender to such a spiritual master completely like one is expected to surrender to Krishna? There will be so many problems, so many complications. So, just like Prabhupada is telling, this Vaidarbhi, the example he is taking from the Bhagavatam, Narad Muni's instructions to Prachina Bhari, Prabhupada is also telling, what should the disciples do when the spiritual master disappears? And that Prabhupada explains a few verses later, when it is described what did Vaidarbhi do when King Malaidhwaja, living in the forest and executing Nirjana Bhajana, he passed away. So I'll skip some verses and come to that particular description. The daughter of King Vidarbha, Vaidarbhi, continued as usual to serve her husband, who was seated in a steady posture, until she could ascertain that he had passed away from the body. This King Malayadhwaja, he was absorbed in meditation on the super soul, because that was the process in the time he lived. And in that state, he completely became absorbed in meditation on the super soul and quit his body. So she was serving him even as he was sitting down without any external activity, without moving from that position. She was serving him until she could ascertain that he had passed away from the body. Then it is described, while she was serving her husband by massaging his legs, she could feel that his feet were no longer warm and could thus understand that he had already passed away from the body. She felt great anxiety upon being left alone, etc. So the description is there. Being now alone and a widow in that forest, the daughter of Vidarbha began to lament incessantly, shedding tears which soaked her breasts and crying very loudly. So, here Prabhupada says in the purport, figuratively, the queen is supposed to be the disciple of the king. Thus, when the mortal body of the spiritual master expires, his disciple should cry exactly as the queen cries when the king leaves his body. However, the disciple and spiritual master are never separated because the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple as long as the disciple follows strictly the instructions of the spiritual master. A woman, when she becomes a widow, she definitely feels separation from her husband. And it's natural she will cry. Now, Prabhupada says, when the mortal body of the spiritual master expires, the disciple should cry exactly as the queen cries when the king leaves his body. That means the disciples also feel separation when physically the spiritual master disappears. But that does not mean that the disciple and spiritual master are separated. Whereas a widow, a woman, she feels separation from her husband. And actually the husband is not present. So she feels, she cries in feeling of separation from her husband. No longer I can associate. But Prabhupada clarifies that's not the case with the spiritual master disappearing. The disciples need not lament or continue to lament that the spiritual master has disappeared, now I don't have association. So Prabhupada says, as long as the disciple follows strictly the instructions of the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple. Now we are following Prabhupada's instructions given in his July 9th letter and many other places, that he continues to remain the spiritual master of all the devotees in this Krishna conscious movement that he started. Now, one of the objections that some opponents or critics raise is that how do you serve the spiritual master when he is no longer present? How do you associate with him? How do you ask him questions? How do you take guidance? These are all the questions they raise. And they have a concocted theory. You require to take initiation from a living guru. This is their concoction. You take a diksha from a whom? Living guru. So now if you read what Prabhupada says here, it's very clear that as far as a bona fide spiritual master is concerned, who is a pure devotee, there is no question of living or dead. Prabhupada specifically says, just as the spirit soul never dies, similarly the spiritual master, when he actually physically disappears from the mortal body, he is not to be considered as dead and gone. He is not to be considered as dead and gone. He is still present. And Prabhupada says here, spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple as long as the disciple follows strictly the instructions of the spiritual master. So we have clear instructions of Srila Prabhupada. In fact, we have so many instructions. I was telling another devotee in the morning, today morning, that Prabhupada has instructed us in practically everything that is necessary for us to achieve complete perfection in spiritual life, even after his disappearance. Let's say by the time he disappears, there are disciples who have not achieved perfection. So what do? Spiritual master is no longer there physically to guide them. What do? So Prabhupada says what a disciple should do after the disappearance of spiritual master. So, Prabhupada clarifies here, this is called association of Vani, words. Physical presence is called Vapu. As long as the spiritual master is physically present, the disciple should serve the physical body, the spiritual master. And when the spiritual master is no longer physically existing, the disciple should serve the instructions of the spiritual master. It's very clear. The service does not stop. Whereas in the case of material affairs, Vaidarbhi, she was serving her husband very faithfully, very nicely. She followed him to the forest and she undertook so many austerities living in the forest. But when the husband disappeared, she actually is missing her husband. She cannot serve him. Correct? Whereas in spiritual affairs, there is no separation between the disciple and the spiritual master. There is no separation. Okay, then Prabhupada further says, I'll just skip all the details of the description of Vaidarbhi. I'll directly come to Prabhupada's explanation about spiritual master. Whenever an Acharya comes following the superior orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his representative, he establishes the principles of religion as enunciated in the Bhagavad Gita. See, what is Prabhupada's position? Prabhupada is not just somebody who is representing the Supreme Lord and teaching neophytes what is spiritual life, because he has learned, because he has practiced. Not merely that. Of course, he is doing that. But more than that, Prabhupada is telling, Acharya comes following superior orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his representative, and he establishes the principles of religion as enunciated in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, I come to establish the principles of religion. Dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So when Krishna says sambhavami yuge yuge, I come in every millennium, yuga after yuga, to establish the principle of religion, you should understand that is when dharmasya glani, when people in general become neglectful of following the principles of religion. So the Lord personally comes, he says. Now Prabhupada says the Lord personally comes and he also sends his confidential devotees from the spiritual world. So please try to understand, Prabhupada is coming from the spiritual world and he has come on the order of the Supreme Lord for establishing the principles of religion. Religion means abiding by the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Religious principles begin from the time one surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is the Acharya's duty to spread a bona fide religious system and induce everybody to bow down before the Supreme Lord. One executes the religious principles by rendering devotional service, specifically the 9 items like hearing, chanting, and remembering. Unfortunately, now hear carefully what Prabhupada says. Unfortunately, when the Acharya disappears, rogues and non-devotees take advantage and immediately begin to introduce unauthorized principles in the name of so-called swamis, yogis, philanthropists, welfare workers, and so on. See, what is the danger when a powerful Acharya disappears? And it is seen very clearly, even when Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur disappeared, so much of confusion and unrest was there in the Gaudiya Math, the institution he established. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu disappeared, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is of course Supreme Lord, but he was playing the role of an ideal devotee. So he was playing the role of an Acharya. So when he disappeared, so-called followers who were not properly following his instructions, they later on claimed to be his followers, and in the name of following Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings or instructions, they introduced so many unauthorized principles or systems or practices. And it was only Chaitanya Mahaprabhu passed away in 1534. Only after Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, many generations later, Bhaktivinoda Thakur appeared, and he began to preach Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings. That is when he pointed out there are many followers of Chaitanya who are actually introduced unauthorized principles of religion. And he identified these groups. He identified 31 apasampradayas. Apasampradaya means they are not actually coming in the proper disciplic succession. They claim to be followers, but they are not strictly following the exact teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, these apasampradayas were pointed out by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he extensively wrote books to explain what is the actual teaching of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and how it should be followed. And for actually explaining that, he did not have to himself give some evidence by his own words, but he cited Shastra, he cited the previous Acharyas, and he cited his own spiritual master, Guru Sadhu Shastra. Strictly following Guru Sadhu Shastra, he established some groups of so-called followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as apasampradaya. And he identified what is the mistake they are doing. Aul, Baul, Kartabhaja, Neda, Gauranga Nagari. So many groups emerged. So this is the phenomena that is Prabhupada describing. Unfortunately, when the Acharya disappears, rogues and non-devotees take advantage and immediately begin to introduce unauthorized principles in the name of so-called Swamis, Yogis, philanthropists, welfare workers, and so on. That happened after Krishna's disappearance also. It happened after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's disappearance. It happened even after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur's, Saraswati Thakur's disappearance. It has happened even after Srila Prabhupada's disappearance. So many people claiming to be followers of Srila Prabhupada, they are not strictly following his instructions exactly as he has given. They've introduced so many wrong things, interpretation, by interpreting his instructions. Prabhupada never gave a direct, clear instruction that anybody should be the next Acharya. Neither he gave, you become the next spiritual master and initiate like I have initiated. Never he gave a direct instruction like that. Very clear instructions. But in his books, even before his disappearance, he elaborately explained who is a bona fide spiritual master, what are his qualifications, how to identify a bona fide spiritual master. Everything is given. Elaborately is explained. Right here, we can read. He's telling, what should the disciples do when the spiritual master disappears? An Acharya, of the stature of Acharya, bona fide spiritual one disappears. What should disciples do? So, Prabhupada further says, the Acharya, the authorized representative of Supreme Lord, establishes these principles taught by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. But when he disappears, once again things become disordered. The perfect disciples of the Acharya try to relieve the situation by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. So what is the duty of the perfect disciples of the Acharya? What do they do when such things happen? They try to relieve the situation by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. So, after Prabhupada's disappearance, whatever confusion was there, that need not be the cause of despondency among the sincere followers. What should a sincere followers do? They should not give up devotional service, or they should not simply leave the institution and go away, because so many discrepancies are there in the administration or in following the orders of Prabhupada, whatever. They should sincerely try to follow the instructions of the spiritual master and try to relieve the situation. So further, Prabhupada says, a devoted disciple of the spiritual master would rather die with the spiritual master than fail to execute the spiritual master's mission. This Prabhupada is giving a parallel for the description here, that a devoted wife will quit her body when her husband passes away, rather than continue to live in his absence. So that is being compared by Prabhupada to a devoted disciple of spiritual master would rather die with the spiritual master than fail to execute the spiritual master's mission. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes down upon this earth to establish the principles of religion, so his representative, the spiritual master, also comes to re-establish religious principles. It is the duty of the disciples to take charge of the mission of the spiritual master and execute it properly. Otherwise, the disciple should decide to die along with the spiritual master. In other words, to execute the will of the spiritual master, the disciple should be prepared to lay down his life and abandon all personal considerations. So the spirit of this statement by Srila Prabhupada is that the sincere disciple or the serious follower of the spiritual master should actually not be concerned with so much personal comforts or personal inconveniences, but rather should execute the will of the spiritual master under all circumstances, including being ready to give up the life if so required in order to execute the will of the spiritual master. So how important it is for the sincere followers of Srila Prabhupada to execute the will of Prabhupada. So what is the will of Prabhupada? That he remains the spiritual master of everyone even after his disappearance, physical disappearance. So therefore, there are many devotees after Srila Prabhupada's disappearance in ISKCON movement, who have actually identified the deviations, the discrepancies, and also with sufficient reason and logic and evidence that the whole movement is suffering or has suffered because of these deviations. If you may not be aware, immediately after Prabhupada's disappearance, some leading disciples, many leading disciples, not some, many leading disciples, they established a system called zonal Acharya system for the initiations to continue, for Diksha to continue, for aspiring devotees who joined or who wanted Diksha after Prabhupada's disappearance. This zonal Acharya system was going on from 1978 till about 1985. What happened in 1985? Not even 1985, 1982 itself. The so-called successor Acharyas, they started falling down. They started giving up sannyas, giving up the post of even being the guru, the Diksha guru. And many of them, not all of them, not many of them, all of them had so many disciples already. Because Prabhupada's movement is such that heavy preaching has happened, and before Prabhupada actually disappeared, many would have been aspiring to become his disciples, to take Diksha from him. So when Prabhupada passed away, they'll ask, so what do we do now? Prabhupada has disappeared. So they said, now we are the successors. You take Diksha from us. So they took Diksha from those leading disciples who claimed that they are the successors. And then, when they started falling down or leaving ISKCON or giving up the post of Guru, then these disciples are all completely confused. They don't know what to do. Because Shastra says, one should never give up the spiritual master under any circumstances. But to whom does those kind of instruction, to whom does it apply? To a bona fide spiritual master who is a pure devotee, who is a perfect Uttamadhikari. He will never fall down. There's no question of his falling down. So if this has happened, then the question may be raised, did Prabhupada really authorize such people to become successors to Prabhupada and exactly act like Prabhupada by giving Diksha, accepting worship from the disciples, as good as God? Because all these disciples, they were worshipping the spiritual master, their spiritual master, the successors of Prabhupada, like Prabhupada was being worshipped, as good as God. So they started accepting Guru Puja. So many things happened. I did not go into details. So it was total chaos, havoc. They created havoc in the whole ISKCON society. Whole ISKCON society. Vyomapad Prabhu, you were in ISKCON at that time, or you were in touch with ISKCON? You're inside the temple. Vyomapad Prabhu was inside the temple. I came in touch with ISKCON in 1985, exactly when the Guru's fall down had started. I did not know anything about Guru. I did not know anything about fall down and all that. I don't know who is Prabhupada even. But as soon as I entered ISKCON temple, then devotees started preaching to me, because preaching was very, very nicely being done, even though the Gurus had started falling down and all that. So I was not told anything about who is a bona fide spiritual, all that. But whatever I could gather by reading Prabhupada's little reading and practicing and following, chanting Hare Krishna, etc., I simply was, because in the after 1985, this worshipping these gurus like Prabhupada, that stopped. Because they can't worship a fallen guru like that. They can't worship him like God. It's out of question. So then in the temple hall, before 1985, between 1978 and 1985, that so-called spiritual master's Vigraha, his picture If he is physically present, he would sit on the Vyasasana next to Prabhupada's Vyasasana, like I am sitting. This is not Vyasasana, by the way. This is class asana. What is this? Class asana. So this is a class asana. For giving Bhagavatam class or speaking on Shastra in the temple, this asana is there for the speaker. But Prabhupada is sitting on what is called as Vyasasana. Vyasasana means he is the present representative of Vyasadeva, who is the universal spiritual master for the entire world. That is Vyasa's position. So, Prabhupada sits on not just an asana out of respect for an advanced devotee or a speaker, we give asana. No, he is sitting on the Vyasasana. And we worship Prabhupada, we call that Vyasa Puja. Vyasa Puja. And how to perform Vyasa Puja is given in the scriptures. Vyasa Puja is done by worshipping the spiritual master as good as God. That's why you see the items that are offered to Krishna in the Arati, 7 items, same items are offered to Prabhupada. Same 7 upacharas are done. You see? Now somebody sometimes, ordinary people, common people, they say, why are you worshipping human being like you worship Krishna, the deities? So what they don't know is, what is the position of the spiritual master who is actually a representative Vyasadeva, who is a pure devotee, who is coming directly from the spiritual world. Vyasadeva has come directly from the spiritual world for Krishna's mission. Similarly, Prabhupada has come from the spiritual world for Krishna's mission. Okay? So, to worship Prabhupada like this is appropriate because of these reasons. We are not sentimentally worshipping Prabhupada because he is great or he is a wonderful devotee. No. Wonderful devotee, we can appreciate, we can respect, we can learn from him so many things. Yes. But you never worship a very advanced devotee or a great devotee or a nice devotee on the level of Krishna unless he is an Acharya, a representative of Vyasadeva. So this has to be very clearly understood. And then what happened after 1985? They removed this additional Vyasasana which was kept. And only Prabhupada's puja was continued. Every day we have Prabhupada worship. Now, what is Prabhupada worship called? In ordinary this thing, Guru Puja. Guru Puja. So, Guru Puja continued in the temple hall only for Prabhupada. But between 78 and 85, what was going on? Prabhupada Guru Puja. After that, Guru Puja for that zonal Acharya, the current Guru. So this was completely wrong, because the person who is sitting there or accepting worship, a successor, is not qualified to accept that. So Shastras say, if somebody is not qualified and they take the position of the Acharya, then for them accepting that worship is like drinking poison as regards their spiritual life. What happens if somebody drinks poison without being qualified like Shiva? Lord Shiva, when there was the churning of the milk ocean, so much poison was generated in the beginning. You would have heard this. So that poison became very, very pungent, and actually it was killing. The very fumes was killing so many people, so many devatas or asuras who were churning the milk ocean for nectar. So then immediately Shiva appeared there and he said, I'll relieve the situation, and he drank away He condensed that whole poison into a little small quantity in his palm and drank that off. But he did not exactly drink it like we drink ordinary liquids. It never went below his throat. He held it there in his throat. And only Shiva can do it. The so-called imitator, the so-called devotees of Shiva who imitate Shiva. This is what is told in the Bhagavad Gita, one of the purports. Shiva smoked, sometime he smoked some ganja. So the followers of Shiva, we are followers of Shiva, so we can also smoke ganja. Even now it goes on, no? You go to some holy place like Kashi particularly, you see this Babajis or some sadhus. So they imitate Shiva. Can they imitate Shiva drinking poison? Never. They drink even one drop of deadly poison, that which is fatal. Immediately they will die. Immediately they will die. Whereas Shiva, no question of death. He is holding it here and he even has got a name, Neelakantha, because his throat has become blue. When somebody consumes real poison, then first thing that happens before they die is the body becomes blue. So apparently Shiva is also affected by that poison being retained here. Right? Somebody may think Shiva also, he is not, able to withstand the effect of that deadly poison that he took and holding it in the throat, because his throat has become blue. So he is affected? No, he is not at all affected, though his throat apparently has become blue. So Shiva is immortal. He never dies. Shiva never dies anyway. So that is the truth about Shiva. That is a fact about Shiva. So just like imitating Shiva is wrong for the so-called followers, similarly imitating the spiritual master without qualification is wrong. Imitation means what? Imitation and following. Imitation is called anukarana in Sanskrit, and following is called anusarana. There's a lot of difference between the two. Anukarana means externally doing what the spiritual master does without understanding the principles, without considering the instructions of the spiritual master specifically given for us. So Shiva has given specific instructions for his followers, what they should do and what they should not do. Similarly, Prabhupada has given specific instructions for all of us, his followers, his disciples, what we should do and what we should not do. Now, those who don't properly study and understand what are the specific instructions of Prabhupada, like here itself is a specific instruction. After the disappearance spiritual master, what should the disciple do? It's most important that I read, no? That the disciple should relieve the situation if there is any commotion or any disturbance or any kind of any kind of confusion in the movement. The disciple should try to relieve the situation by strictly following, sincerely following and executing the will of the spiritual master. You see? That is the duty of the sincere disciples or the real followers. So, Prabhupada says here, if a disciple is very serious to execute the mission of the spiritual master, he immediately associates with the Supreme Personality of Godhead by Vani or Vapu. Vani or Vapu. Vapu is as long as he is physically present. And after his disappearance we should associate with his Vani, his instructions. And what kind of instructions? Instructions specially meant for us to follow. Prabhupada has spoken so many things. Krishna has spoken so many things. Krishna did so many things. But following doesn't mean we do everything Krishna did. Or we selectively do whatever we like to do, whatever Krishna did. No. Krishna performed rasa dance. But Krishna never instructed any of his followers or devotees or disciples or people to actually perform rasa dance. He has never given specific instructions. Nowhere you'll find Krishna give instructions like that. So similarly, Prabhupada has given has written so many things, has explained so many things, has told so many things about spiritual master. But did he ever give specific instruction to follow for his disciples whether they can become spiritual master like him? Did he give ever an instruction like that, explicit instruction? No. So then how can they become spiritual master? Okay. In the beginning we may say some disciples did not understand, therefore they became. But after their fall down, the others, should they continue to become spiritual master? Can they continue? No. Obviously not. Because Prabhupada says, a pure devotee spiritual master who's actually qualified never falls down. Clearly says this. So if somebody has fallen down thinking that Prabhupada gave the instruction that we should become the next spiritual master, he is mistaken, okay, and that's very evident because he fell down, okay. Now what should the others do now? Should immediately stop becoming the spiritual master or accepting somebody who has become the spiritual master. Should stop that. And that's exactly what we are doing. So you understand? So after Prabhupada's disappearance, it's our duty to continue this mission of Srila Prabhupada while strictly following his specific instructions meant for us that he has given. What should we do after the disappearance of spiritual master? Should serve the mission, executing the will of Prabhupada. And Prabhupada has written his will and given us specific instructions. This movement should continue for the next 10,000 years. This mission of Prabhupada. Movement means the mission of Prabhupada. Distribute books, print books, distribute. Preach. People are suffering for want of this knowledge. So much they're suffering. Please preach. Go door to door. Even one place, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells one of his followers that you become Guru and preach the message of Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. Amar Ajnai Guru hoy Tara e Desh. Now this particular instruction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to one of his followers, Kurma Brahmana, is taken as the basis for the current gurus in the opposite camp of ISKCON to actually become gurus. Now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has become guru in what way? Specifically become guru by preaching the message of Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam to whoever you meet, whoever you actually come across. We're preaching. But it doesn't mean that you become guru like Prabhupada and accept worship, give diksha, And Diksha also, what it means is clearly explained in the scriptures, and Prabhupada also explained it very elaborately. Diksha means Divyam Jnanam Yato Dadyat Kuryat Papasya Sankshayam. One who gives Diksha, what does he do for the disciple? He gives him Divya Jnana. Same thing we sing every day when we do Guru Puja. What is in Guru Puja? What do we sing? Chakshudan diloye janme janme Prabhu se Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashito. He opens my darkened eyes. Prabhupada, the bona fide spiritual master, opens my darkened eyes. That means Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnanan Janashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena. Same thing is told in the Upanishads. Same thing Narottam Das Thakur has written in the Guru Puja. That this bona fide spiritual master leads us from darkness to light, enlightens us. Enlightens us. Janme Janme Prabhu say, because he has enlightened me, and he is enlightening me not only physically speaking or physically being present, Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashito. He enlightens me even from within my heart. So such a spiritual master is eternal spiritual master. Janme Janme Prabhu say. So that is the position of that kind of spiritual master that Prabhupada is talking about. That's the kind of spiritual master Narottam Das Thakur says you should worship. Our previous Acharya is teaching us that. So we don't worship somebody who is not exactly qualified like that as good as God. So there are many gurus, different kinds of gurus, but specifically the Diksha Guru is Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashito or Divyam Jnanam Yato Dadyat and Kuryat Papasya Sankshayam. A spiritual master, when he initiates, he takes away the sinful reactions of the disciple. So Prabhupada says, unless a spiritual master is properly qualified, if he takes the sinful reactions of disciple by doing what? By giving Diksha. Like Prabhupada gave Diksha. Okay? They are now giving Diksha, like Prabhupada used to give. So then what happens? If they are not properly qualified, then they will suffer. And they may even fall down. Because as far as they are concerned, their sinful reactions are taken away by Prabhupada because they are disciples of Prabhupada. So, in spite of Prabhupada taking away their sinful reaction when they took Diksha, if they still are afflicted by sinful reactions to the extent that they are not even able to follow the 4 regulative principles, and they are not able to chant 16 rounds, or they are not able to do some basic spiritual activities as a full-time missionary, what does it indicate? That they are taking the reactions of their disciples and that is affecting them. Why? Because they have unauthorizedly become spiritual master. That's why. Prabhupada became spiritual master on authorization by his guru. Prabhupada says very clearly, one cannot become a spiritual master simply on his own. He has to be authorized by the predecessor Acharya. Very clear, very clear. He has to be authorized by predecessor Acharya. And when he is authorized, what happens? He is protected against any fall down. Why? Because what happens is, he takes the reactions of the disciple who takes Diksha but those reactions are passed on through the parampara to Krishna. And Krishna is apapa vidham. Ishopanishad, it is described. The Supreme Lord is totally unaffected by sin. Just like a blazing fire. Whatever you put into it will get burnt to ashes. The fire won't get put off. The fire won't get put off. Similarly, Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, they accept disciples, but they will never get affected by any of the disciples' previous sinful reactions. Can you imagine? Prabhupada accepted some of the aspirants who were hippies. And they were into so many, unfortunately, they were in ignorance, being misled by Maya, they were into so many sinful activities. But Prabhupada took those reactions and they became first-class devotees. Very quickly, 6 months, they became first-class Vaishnavas. So, but Prabhupada got affected? No. He will never get affected. Because what happens? Through the parampara, all those sinful reactions go to Krishna. Prabhupada explains this. And Krishna is apapa vidham. Krishna is, for him, there is no question of sin or pious or anything. And Krishna says, Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. Do not worry. If somebody has hesitation for surrendering to Krishna, because I am so sinful, I got so many sinful reactions. How can I surrender to you, my dear Lord? So Prabhupada says, Krishna assures, don't worry. In spite of sinful reactions, you surrender to me, give up those sinful activities. I will free you from all those sinful reactions. You don't have to suffer anymore when you surrender to Krishna. Krishna will nullify all the sinful reactions. So that is what happens. When you surrender to spiritual master, it is same as, I told you, surrendering to Krishna. If you surrender to Krishna, what happens? What does Krishna say? I will free you from all sinful reactions. So that is what Prabhupada is also doing. Can somebody who is not qualified do that? If another person surrenders to a unqualified or improper spiritual master, is it possible? No. And the result of taking that position without qualification is the person is no longer able to maintain his own bhakti. It's very unfortunate, very sad. We are very, very unhappy about it. We pray to Krishna to kindly protect them. But they cannot continue to remain Guru, or the others cannot continue to follow that practice. You see? So I have a lot more to say, but I'll stop here. So on this most auspicious disappearance day of Srila Prabhupada. Now, why this disappearance day is also important for us? Because even how to quit this body in Krishna consciousness is taught by Prabhupada. Acharya means he teaches by his personal example. We all are going to face death. And we know from Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, if you have to be successful in this human form of life, you should remember Krishna at the time of death. So how do we remember? What Prabhupada is saying? You should chant Hare Krishna and practice chanting and remembering Krishna. Krishna also says that. Now how does it actually happen? Prabhupada showed that, demonstrated that. So, even disappearance is important because we got to learn and follow and understand. Lessons are there even in his disappearance. Okay? So therefore we worship him even on his disappearance day in a special way, because he is the Acharya who teaches even how to die. Like Bhishma Deva, ideal devotee who taught how a devotee quits his body in full Krishna consciousness. Same way, Prabhupada also taught. So therefore we observe this disappearance day as a special celebration or event. Hare Krishna. I'll stop here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.